I am Gracie, 32 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought my sister Amber and I would always have each other despite our differences. We grew up sharing secrets and dreams, but somewhere along the way, she changed. When her wedding invitation arrived, I was thrilled. Then came the call. I was no longer invited because I was not classy enough for her high society wedding. The worst part? She still expected me to babysit her children during the ceremony and reception. The disrespect stung like nothing before. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever dealt with entitled family members who treat you like a doormat. Growing up in Seattle with Amber was like living with two different people in one body. As sisters born just 3 years apart, we shared a bedroom decorated half with my practical posters of animals and half with her magazine cutouts of fashion models and celebrities. From the beginning, our personalities contrasted sharply. I approached life with practicality and honesty, finding joy in simple pleasures and genuine connections. Amber, on the other hand, obsessed over appearances, constantly seeking validation from the right people and judging everything and everyone by their social value. Our parents worked hard to provide a stable middle-class life. Dad was a dedicated electrician who taught us the value of hard work, while Mom worked as a dental assistant and showed us how to care for others. They raised us with solid values like honesty, respect, and appreciating what you have. These lessons stuck with me, but Amber seemed to interpret them differently as she grew older. One summer when I was 9 and Amber was 12, our family went camping at Olympic National Park. While I embraced the adventure, collecting pine cones and learning to fish with Dad, Amber complained incessantly about the dirt, the lack of proper bathrooms, and how the other kids at school would be vacationing at resorts. She refused to participate in most activities, staying in the tent scrolling through magazines she had smuggled in her backpack. That evening, when we gathered around the campfire to roast marshmallows, she reluctantly joined us but spent the whole time talking about how she deserved better than this type of vacation. Our different approaches to life became even more apparent during our middle school talent show. Amber had prepared an elaborate dance routine, and when the sound system malfunctioned minutes before her performance, she had a complete meltdown backstage, refusing to go on without perfect conditions. In contrast, when my science demonstration faced similar technical problems, I simply adapted, turning it into an interactive presentation that got the audience involved. Amber watched from the sidelines, genuinely puzzled by my ability to roll with the punches. Christmas always highlighted our different priorities. One year, when Amber was 15, she spent the entire holiday season dropping hints about an expensive designer purse she wanted. When she received practical gifts instead, including a lovely handmade scarf from our grandmother, she barely concealed her disappointment, later stuffing the scarf in the back of her closet. Meanwhile, I treasured the family photo album Mom had put together, spending hours looking through memories of our family adventures. Even then, there were warning signs of Amber becoming a social climber. When her friends from wealthier families invited her over, she would return home criticizing our modest 3-bedroom house, complaining about our furniture, and suggesting ways our parents could appear more sophisticated. I remember feeling hurt watching Mom try to hide her sadness when Amber asked why we could not afford granite countertops like her friend Sophia's family. Despite growing differences, I remained fiercely loyal to my sister. When classmates commented on Amber's snobbish behavior, I defended her. When she forgot my birthday because she was busy with her popular friends, I made excuses for her. I genuinely believed that beneath her status-seeking exterior was still the sister who had once held my hand on the first day of kindergarten and promised nothing would ever come between us. High school cemented our divergent paths. Amber gravitated towards students from affluent families, adapting her accent and mannerisms to match theirs, while I formed friendships based on shared interests and values, rather than social standing. She joined cheerleading and student government, carefully cultivating her image, while I found my place in the art club and volunteering at the local animal shelter. Our friend groups rarely overlapped, and when they did, Amber often seemed embarrassed by my practical genes and casual conversation style. Through it all, I held on to a dream that our sisterly bond would transcend these differences. On nights when she would actually talk to me, Usually when she needed advice about a problem she could not share with her image-conscious friends, I caught glimpses of the real Amber. In these rare, vulnerable moments, I believed that eventually, when all the high school drama and status-seeking faded away, we would find our way back to the closeness we once shared. I could not have imagined how much further apart we would drift in the years ahead. After college, our lives took predictably different directions. I pursued my passion for education and became a kindergarten teacher in our hometown. The joy of watching children discover the world and develop their potential fulfilled me in ways Amber never seemed to understand. My classroom became my second home, decorated with student artwork and filled with the kind of genuine laughter Amber had long ago replaced with her practiced social chuckle. Meanwhile, Amber moved to New York City immediately after graduating with a business degree. She landed a job in fashion marketing at a prestigious company, a position she referenced constantly in conversation. Her social media became a carefully curated showcase of exclusive restaurants, designer clothing, and connections with people she deemed important. When we spoke on the phone, which became increasingly rare, she would casually drop names of celebrities she had glimpsed at industry events, as though they were close personal friends. The real turning point came when she met Richard, a wealthy businessman 15 years her senior who owned several luxury hotels. Their whirlwind romance culminated in an extravagant wedding that our parents could barely afford to attend. I maxed out my credit card to be there for her, only to be seated at a table far from the main party, with distant acquaintances who seemed confused about who I was. Within 2 years, Amber gave birth to Charlotte, and 18 months later, Ethan arrived. I was desperate to form a bond with my niece and nephew, but opportunities were limited by both distance and Amber's increasingly rigid ideas about who should influence her children. When I did visit, Amber scheduled our time around her children's numerous classes and activities, treating me more like an audience for their performances than family. Despite the growing divide, I made consistent efforts to maintain our relationship. I called regularly, remembering birthdays and anniversaries with thoughtful gifts rather than expensive ones. 3 times a year, I would save from my teacher's salary to afford flights to New York, staying at budget hotels far from her upscale neighborhood to make the trips possible. I kept track of Charlotte's interest in horses and Ethan's obsession with dinosaurs, sending books and small toys that reflected their passions. Amber's criticism of my life choices became more frequent and less subtle. During one visit, as I helped prepare dinner in her expansive kitchen, she looked at my sensible shoes and casual cardigan and sighed, saying, "You know, Gracie, you could make so much more of yourself if you tried. You are not unattractive, but you dress like you have given up." Her comment stung, but I reminded myself that appearance had always been her currency, not mine. When I shared exciting news about being nominated for a teaching award, Amber responded with a dismissive wave, saying, "That is nice, but it is just teaching, right? Anyone can do that. The real challenge is succeeding in a competitive industry like mine." Later that same evening, she spent 30 minutes detailing her recent promotion, expecting enthusiastic responses to every detail. My modest one-bedroom apartment became another target for her judgment. During a rare visit to Seattle, she walked through my home with barely concealed disdain, asking, "Do you ever think about upgrading? This place is so small. Where do you even entertain guests?" The question was ironic given that my apartment was often filled with friends for dinner parties and game nights, while her immaculate penthouse seemed to exist primarily for show. My dating life did not escape her scrutiny either. When I was in a relationship with Paul, a kind and intelligent science teacher at my school, Amber could not understand my attraction to someone she deemed ordinary. "You could do better," she insisted after meeting him once. "There must be some doctors or lawyers in Seattle. Why settle for another teacher?" The relationship eventually ended for unrelated reasons. But Amber took it as confirmation that I should aim higher, completely missing the emotional connection that had made it special. After 7 years of marriage, Amber and Richard divorced amid rumors of his infidelity. She received a substantial settlement but seemed more wounded by the social implications than the emotional loss. Within 6 months, she was engaged to Taylor, another wealthy man who worked in finance and moved in elite social circles. The engagement announcement came via an elaborate video she sent to family members, featuring professional photography and a custom musical score. The wedding plans quickly escalated into what Amber described as the social event of the season. She chose an exclusive resort on a private island, with a guest list that apparently included minor celebrities and influential business figures. Despite the extravagance, I was genuinely happy that she had found someone new and seemed excited about the future. When the official invitation arrived in a heavy cream envelope with gold foil lettering, I immediately began planning. I scheduled a substitute teacher for my class, researched appropriate attire within my budget, and spent months saving for both the travel expenses and a gift I could afford that would not embarrass her. I looked forward to seeing Charlotte and Ethan again, hoping to strengthen our relationship, despite Amber's controlling nature. In my mind, this wedding represented a fresh start for all of us, a chance to reconnect as family. I had no idea what was actually coming. The video call came on a Tuesday evening, just 3 weeks before the wedding. I had just finished grading papers and was relaxing with a cup of tea when my phone lit up with Amber's name. Excited to discuss wedding details, I answered with a smile that quickly faded as I noticed her stiff expression. Amber had clearly rehearsed what she was about to say, her voice taking on the formal tone she used for business calls. "Gracie, I need to discuss something important about the wedding," she began, not quite meeting my eyes through the screen. After careful consideration and consultation with Taylor's family and our wedding planner, we have decided to make some adjustments to our guest list. My stomach tightened as she continued, each word more painful than the last. The Hampton Springs Resort has a certain aesthetic we are trying to maintain, and honestly, I am concerned that you might feel out of place among our guests. The truth is, your presence might not align with the sophisticated atmosphere we are creating. When I asked her to explain what she meant, the floodgates opened to a torrent of criticism I never saw coming. "Your accent is too common, Gracie. You have this distinctly middle-class way of speaking that stands out in the wrong way. And your mannerisms, the way you laugh too loudly and talk with your hands, it would be embarrassing in front of Taylor's colleagues and family." As if sensing my growing hurt, Amber doubled down rather than backing off. "We will be hosting several high-profile guests, including the CEO of Taylor's company and some people connected to the fashion industry. What would you even talk about with them? Your kindergarten classroom and craft projects? It just would not work." The final blow came when she criticized my appearance directly. "Let us be honest, Gracie. Your fashion sense is hopeless. You would need an entire new wardrobe, professional hairstyling, and honestly, some serious coaching on how to carry yourself. We just do not have time for that kind of makeover before the wedding." I sat in stunned silence, tears welling up despite my efforts to maintain composure. This was my sister, my own flesh and blood, essentially telling me I was too unsophisticated and common to attend her wedding. The betrayal cut deeper than any relationship breakup I had ever experienced. Just when I thought the conversation could not get more painful, Amber shifted gears entirely. "So while you will not be attending the ceremony or reception, I do have something important to ask you," she said, her tone brightening artificially. "Would you be willing to watch Charlotte and Ethan during the wedding weekend? The resort does not allow children at the formal events, and we need someone we trust to look after them." The audacity of her request left me speechless. I was not good enough to attend her wedding, but I was good enough to provide free childcare? When I finally found my voice, I asked exactly that question. Amber seemed genuinely confused by my reaction. "These are completely different situations, Gracie," she explained as if talking to one of my kindergarten students. "The kids love you, and you are good with children. It is literally your job. Plus, we will pay you something for your time." When I pointed out the contradiction in her thinking, she became defensive. "I am doing you a favor even involving you in the weekend at all. Most people would be grateful for an all-expenses-paid trip to Hampton Springs, even if they are not attending the main events. Do you know how much those rooms cost per night?" My mind raced through possible responses. I could refuse outright, booking the next flight back to Seattle and cutting contact. I could argue further, forcing her to acknowledge the disrespect. Or I could swallow my pride and agree, if only for the chance to spend time with Charlotte and Ethan, who had done nothing wrong and deserved a relationship with their aunt. After a long pause, I made my decision based on love for my niece and nephew rather than the anger burning inside me. "Fine, Amber. I will watch the kids during your wedding," I said quietly. "Just send me the details about when to arrive and what you need." Relief washed over her face, followed quickly by a business-like efficiency as she promised to email me a schedule and instructions. The call ended with her saying, "Thanks, Gracie. I knew I could count on you," without a hint of recognition of what she had just done. That night, I cried myself to sleep, questions swirling through my mind. Had I always been an embarrassment to her? Was our entire childhood relationship just something to be outgrown? Did I make the right choice in agreeing to babysit? The pain of rejection mixed with anger at my own willingness to accept such treatment. Something would have to change, but at that moment I had no idea what form that change would take. 2 days before the wedding weekend, I arrived at Amber's Manhattan penthouse for what she called a babysitting briefing. The doorman eyed my practical travel outfit with barely concealed judgment as he announced my arrival via intercom. When he received confirmation to send me up, his directions came with a subtle reminder that service providers typically used the service elevator. I chose not to correct his assumption. Stepping into Amber's home was like entering a different world from my cozy apartment. Everything gleamed with expensive minimalism, more like a high-end furniture showroom than a place where children actually lived. White couches that seemed to have never been touched sat across from abstract art pieces that probably cost more than my annual salary. Family photos were conspicuously absent, replaced by professional portraits of Amber, Taylor, and the children posed stiffly in color-coordinated outfits. The meeting was not just with Amber, but included Taylor's parents, Margaret and William, the wedding planner Serena, and of course, Charlotte and Ethan. I was introduced as the children's aunt and their caregiver for the weekend, 2 descriptors that apparently could not exist simultaneously in this world. Taylor's mother Margaret immediately launched into questions about my childcare qualifications, seemingly unaware or uninterested in our family connection. "Do you have experience with children from proper backgrounds?" she asked, peering over designer glasses. "They have certain expectations about how they are spoken to and treated." Before I could answer that I was, in fact, a professional educator, Amber jumped in. "Gracie is a kindergarten teacher, so she knows the basics, but I will be providing detailed instructions to ensure the children maintain their routine." The wedding planner Serena treated me like another vendor to be managed, explaining that I would be staying in a room adjacent to the children's suite, but on a different floor from the main wedding party. She handed me a staff badge to wear at all times on resort grounds. The purpose, she explained without a trace of irony, was so security would know I belonged there despite not looking like a typical guest. Throughout this conversation, Charlotte and Ethan bounced around the room, their behavior painting a clear picture of Amber's parenting style. 8-year-old Charlotte interrupted adults repeatedly without correction, at one point declaring my shoes boring and my haircut cheap. 6-year-old Ethan threw a cushion across the room, narrowly missing an expensive vase, then giggled when I caught it midair. When Taylor's father, William, politely suggested that perhaps the children should settle down, Amber laughed indulgently. "They are just excited about the wedding. They are such spirited children, so full of personality. Are not you, my little angels?" The children took this as permission to escalate, with Charlotte pulling out her tablet and playing a game at full volume while Ethan began opening and slamming cabinet doors in the kitchen. Neither Amber nor Taylor made any meaningful attempt to redirect them. Instead, Taylor offered them candy if they would sit quietly for just 10 minutes while the adults finished talking. When the children had briefly focused on their sugar bribe, Amber pulled out a leather portfolio containing what she called my briefing materials. The stack of papers inside outlined a weekend schedule so rigid and detailed it would have challenged a military operation. The first section covered dietary requirements. Both children apparently followed a strictly organic, non-GMO diet with specific brands listed for everything from breakfast cereals to bedtime snacks. Charlotte would not eat food that touched on her plate, while Ethan required all meat to be cut into precise small squares. Both children expected freshly prepared meals rather than anything pre-packaged, despite neither showing any interest in actually eating what was prepared. Next came the elaborate bedtime rituals that would consume nearly 2 hours each night. Charlotte required 3 specific stories read in exact order, followed by a detailed check for monsters under precisely 27 different spots in the room. Ethan would only sleep with 11 specific stuffed animals arranged in a particular configuration, with water at exactly 58 degrees Fahrenheit in a cup that was blue, never red or clear. The entertainment schedule mapped out activities in 15-minute increments, with minimal downtime and no room for spontaneity. Screen time was both criticized as harmful and relied upon heavily, with specific educational apps permitted between 3:15 and 4:30 but not a minute before or after. Perhaps most infuriating was the dress code section. The children needed to change outfits multiple times daily based on activities, with detailed instructions for hairstyling and accessorizing for Charlotte. Amber emphasized that under no circumstances should I allow them to look disheveled or underdressed, as they might be photographed by the wedding photographer during designated family sessions. The final insult came when Amber discussed compensation. "We were thinking $30 per day should be fair," she said casually, as if offering a generous sum. "After all, you will be getting free accommodation at a 5-star resort." I bit back the response that professional childcare for 2 high-maintenance children would normally cost at least $20 per hour, not per day. Instead, I simply nodded, already forming the outlines of a plan in my mind. As the meeting wrapped up, Amber pulled me aside for some final words of wisdom. "Just remember not to teach them any of your, common habits," she whispered. "No public school slang or incorrect grammar. And please do not let them eat anything from vending machines or fast food. They have sensitive systems." Taylor added his own condescending comment as he showed me out. "We really appreciate this, Grace. I know Amber feels better knowing family is watching the kids, even if you could not quite fit in at the actual wedding. We are doing you a favor too, giving you a taste of how the other half lives. Just try not to break anything expensive at the resort, okay?" I left the penthouse with my hands shaking from suppressed anger, but my resolve strengthening with every step. For years, I had accepted Amber's treatment, making excuses and overlooking slights for the sake of family peace. But watching how her parenting was creating entitled, disrespectful children made me realize that continuing to enable her behavior was helping no one, least of all Charlotte and Ethan. The Hampton Springs Resort lived up to its reputation as a playground for the wealthy. Sprawling green lawns surrounded a colonial-style main building, with luxury cabins and guest houses scattered across the manicured grounds. My room, while technically on resort property, was in the furthest building from the main facilities, clearly designated for support staff rather than guests. Still, it was clean and comfortable, with 2 adjoining rooms prepared for the children. Amber had promised to bring the children at 10 in the morning the day before the wedding, giving us time to settle in before the rehearsal dinner that evening. By 1 in the afternoon, I had called her 3 times with no answer, and was beginning to worry about our schedule for the day. Finally, at nearly 1:30, a resort golf cart pulled up with Amber, Charlotte, and Ethan. Amber did not bother with an apology for being hours late. The spa appointment ran long, and then we had to deal with a crisis about the flower arrangements, she explained hurriedly, already looking at her phone for messages. The rehearsal starts in 4 hours, and I still need to check on the welcome bags for the guests. Charlotte and Ethan tumbled out of the cart, already whining about being hungry and bored. Both looked overtired and irritable, with Charlotte still in pajama bottoms paired incongruously with a sequin top, and Ethan wearing mismatched shoes. This was a far cry from the meticulous appearance Amber usually insisted upon for social media photos. As I helped unload their bags, I immediately noticed problems. "Where are their comfort items?" I asked, remembering the extensive list of essential sleep toys from the briefing. "And Charlotte's allergy medication? The activity supplies you mentioned?" Amber waved dismissively. "You will figure it out. There is a gift shop on the property if you need anything. Just charge it to the room. Now, remember they need to be fed lunch immediately, but nothing heavy since they will have treats at the evening kids' party." "What kids' party?" I asked, confused. This was the first I had heard of any event for children. "Oh, did I not mention that? The resort is hosting all the children of wedding guests for a movie night during the rehearsal dinner. Charlotte and Ethan will need to be there by 6, dressed appropriately for photos. The theme is nautical casual, so navy and white. Before I could point out that she had sent me no information about this event or appropriate clothing, Amber was already backing away toward the waiting golf cart. Taylor is waiting for me at the bridal luncheon. Just text if there is an emergency, but try to handle everything yourself. That is what we are paying you for. And with that, she was gone, leaving me with 2 hungry, cranky children and half the supplies I needed for the weekend. Charlotte immediately flopped onto the couch and pulled out her tablet, while Ethan began opening every drawer and cabinet in the kitchenette, slamming each shut when he did not find anything interesting. I took a deep breath and went into teacher mode. Okay guys, let us get some lunch first, and then we can unpack and plan our afternoon. I have some sandwiches prepared, or we could order something from room service if you prefer. I do not eat sandwiches unless the crust is cut off and they are in triangles, not rectangles, Charlotte declared without looking up from her screen. And I only drink apple juice from the Green Valley Organic brand. Do you have that? Ethan had moved on to jumping on one of the beds. I hate sandwiches. I want chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs and chocolate milk with the swirly straw. Mom always gives me the swirly straw. After 30 minutes of negotiation, I managed to get them to accept room service grilled cheese for Charlotte and chicken strips for Ethan, though both barely touched the fresh fruit I ordered as a side. Throughout the meal, they complained about everything from the temperature of the food to the color of the plates. Following lunch, the situation deteriorated further. While helping unpack their bags, I discovered that essential items were indeed missing. No comfort blanket for Ethan. No favorite stuffed bunny for Charlotte. No activity books, craft supplies, or any of the specific toys Amber had listed as must-haves to keep them entertained. When I tried to establish a plan for the afternoon, both children rebelled against every suggestion. The resort pool was too cold. The nature walk sounded boring. The board games I had brought from home were for babies. When I finally proposed watching a movie in the room until we needed to prepare for the evening, they agreed, but fought bitterly over which film to choose. The worst moment came after the movie, when I began looking for their nautical casual outfits for the evening children's party. Neither suitcase contained anything remotely matching the dress code Amber had mentioned. When I called her again, the call went straight to voicemail. A text received only a brief reply. Figure it out. In wedding makeup session. Can't talk. While searching through their luggage for any possible outfit combinations, I made a discovery that broke my heart. Tucked into a side pocket of my own suitcase was the navy blue dress I had carefully selected for the wedding before being uninvited. I had forgotten to remove it when repacking for my new role as babysitter. Charlotte spotted it as I quickly tried to fold it away. "Is that your dress, Aunt Gracie?" she asked, suddenly interested. "Yes, sweetie. I was going to wear it to your mom's wedding before plans changed," I answered carefully. A strange look crossed her face. "Mom said we could play dress up with a blue dress. Is that the one?" When I did not immediately answer, she continued. "She said it was garbage anyway, and we could use it for our princess game." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean, Charlotte?" Before she could answer, Ethan piped up excitedly. "We already played with it. It is in our playroom at home. We used scissors to make it prettier, with fringes and holes for the ball gown." I sat heavily on the edge of the bed as the realization hit me. Amber had not only uninvited me from her wedding, but had allowed her children to destroy the dress I had saved for months to purchase. The deliberate cruelty of the act struck me like a physical blow. Charlotte, seeing my expression, added the final devastating detail. "Mom said your dress was trash just like your apartment and your job. She said you are just a babysitter who plays with little kids because you are not smart enough for a real job like hers." In that moment, something shifted inside me. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, and allowed myself 5 minutes of silent tears. This was not just about a ruined dress or even the wedding snub. It was about years of subtle and not so subtle put-downs, of allowing myself to be treated as less than, of enabling behavior that was now being passed down to the next generation. When I emerged from the bathroom, my decision was made. I would fulfill my commitment to care for Charlotte and Ethan this weekend. But I would do it my way. These children deserved better than to grow up believing that treating people disrespectfully was acceptable. And I deserved better than to continue accepting such treatment from my own sister. With renewed purpose, I turned to the children with a calm smile. It looks like we need to be creative about your outfits for tonight. Let us see what we have to work with. And then tomorrow, we are going to have some fun learning new things together. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, the day of Amber's wedding. Rather than dwelling on what I was missing, I focused on the opportunity before me. The children had returned from their movie night overtired and irritable, falling asleep well past their scheduled bedtime despite my best efforts. I let them sleep in, preparing for the structured approach I planned to implement once they woke up. At 8:30, I opened the curtains to let sunlight fill the room. "Good morning. Today is going to be a great day," I announced cheerfully. "We are going to try something new while your mom and dad are busy with the wedding." Charlotte groaned and pulled the blanket over her head, while Ethan immediately reached for the tablet left charging by his bed. Neither was accustomed to mornings without screens or servants catering to their whims. Instead of handing over electronics, I laid out a simple, clear plan. First, we make our beds and get dressed. Then we have breakfast together. After that, we can choose from some fun activities I have planned. No tablets or TV until after lunch. And only if we have accomplished some of our goals for the day. The rebellion was immediate and intense. Charlotte threw a pillow across the room. "You cannot tell us what to do. You are just the babysitter. I am telling Mom." She reached for her phone, but I gently intercepted it. "Your mom is getting ready for her wedding right now," I explained calmly. "She asked me to take care of you today, and that includes helping you have a balanced day with different kinds of activities. Making your bed takes less than 5 minutes, and then we can have those chocolate chip pancakes I saw on the room service menu." Ethan's lower lip trembled threateningly. "I never make my bed at home. The lady does it, and I want my tablet now." His voice rose to a shriek on the last word, a tactic that clearly worked with Amber but would not work with me. I remained calm but firm. "I understand you are used to different rules at home. Today, we are going to try my rules, which include being respectful to each other, taking care of our own spaces, and balancing fun activities with responsibilities. The tablet will be available after lunch if you make good choices this morning." The next hour was challenging, to put it mildly. Both children tested every boundary with tears, threats, and tantrums that would have impressed Broadway directors. I held firm, neither raising my voice nor backing down. When Ethan threw himself on the floor kicking, I simply sat nearby and commented, "I see you are feeling frustrated. When you are ready to talk about it calmly, I am here." The first breakthrough came when Charlotte, perhaps bored with her brother's continuing tantrum, reluctantly pulled her blanket up over her pillow in a haphazard attempt at bed-making. I provided genuine, specific praise. "I really appreciate you taking that first step, Charlotte. You figured out how to straighten the blanket all by yourself. Would you like me to show you a quick way to make the corners look neat?" Surprised by positive reinforcement rather than criticism of her imperfect effort, she nodded. Together, we smoothed the blanket and arranged the pillows. The pride on her face when we finished was subtle but unmistakable. She had accomplished something tangible. However small, Ethan, seeing his sister receive positive attention, soon abandoned his tantrum and demanded help with his own bed. I guided him through the process without doing it for him, celebrating his success with genuine enthusiasm. "That is problem-solving, buddy. You figured out how to tuck in that tricky corner all by yourself." Breakfast followed a similar pattern of resistance, followed by tentative cooperation. I involved them in placing the room service order, setting the table, and pouring their own juice from a small pitcher. When Charlotte spilled some juice, I showed her where cleaning supplies were kept rather than cleaning up for her. She seemed genuinely surprised that I did not scold her for the accident, and even more surprised that she was capable of cleaning it herself. After breakfast, we moved on to my planned activities, starting with making homemade Play-Doh using ingredients from a care package I had quickly assembled from the resort gift shop. Initially skeptical, both children soon became absorbed in mixing, kneading, and creating. Charlotte showed unexpected patience, teaching Ethan how to roll perfect balls, while he delighted in discovering he could mix colors to make new ones. By lunchtime, a remarkable shift had begun. The constant whining had reduced significantly. Both children had experienced the satisfaction of creating something themselves, helping with meal preparation, and receiving authentic praise for genuine efforts, rather than empty flattery for existing. They had begun asking rather than demanding, and saying thank you without prompting. The afternoon brought new opportunities for growth. We built an elaborate blanket fort in the living area of the suite, complete with pillows and string lights borrowed from the resort housekeeping staff, who seemed charmed by our project. Inside our creation, I read stories, and we played simple word games. When Ethan grew frustrated with losing a game, I taught him phrases to express his feelings appropriately. I feel disappointed when I lose. Instead of, you are cheating. I hate this game. Charlotte revealed artistic talent when I brought out sketch pads and colored pencils. She drew a detailed picture of the resort grounds but seemed afraid to make mistakes. I showed her how to embrace imperfections, turning an accidental line into a new element of the drawing. You just solved a creative problem, I told her. That is what real artists do. During a brief quiet time, I allowed them tablet access, but with a purpose. We looked up information about the flowers used in wedding decorations, learning their names and origins. This led to a nature scavenger hunt on the resort grounds, where we collected fallen leaves and flowers to press into keepsake bookmarks for Amber and Taylor. The children began asking questions about my life as a teacher, genuinely curious about my classroom and students. When I described our class pet hamster and the responsibility chart my students used, Ethan wondered aloud if they could make a chart too. Together, we created a simple responsibility system with achievable goals and small rewards, their ownership of the process ensuring their investment in following it. Throughout the day, I maintained clear, consistent boundaries while building genuine connection. When behaviors needed correction, I addressed the action rather than criticizing the child. Instead of "you are being rude," I used "when you interrupt, it makes it hard to hear what others are saying." This subtle shift helped them recognize that their worth was not tied to their behavior, while still holding them accountable. By evening, the transformation was noticeable enough that the resort staff commented on the children's polite behavior when we visited the ice cream shop as a reward for their efforts throughout the day. Charlotte said please and thank you without prompting, while Ethan waited patiently for his turn rather than pushing to the front as he had the previous day. I had expected to receive check-in texts or calls from Amber throughout such an important day, but my phone remained silent. At the children's bedtime, I sent a brief update with a photo of them reading together in their blanket fort, noting that all was well and they were enjoying their day. No response came. Hours after putting the children to bed, well past 11 at night, my phone finally rang. Amber's voice came through slurred and loud against a background of music and laughter. "Hey, Gracie! How are my little monsters doing?" "They are fine," I replied. "They have been asleep for hours. How was the wedding?" "Amazing. Absolutely perfect. Everyone said it was the most elegant event they had ever attended." She bragged, clearly intoxicated. "Listen, tiny change of plans. We are extending the celebration. The resort has arranged a post-wedding brunch tomorrow that is turning into an all-day thing. You can keep the kids until tomorrow evening, right?" The original plan had been for Amber and Taylor to collect the children by noon the next day. I thought carefully before responding. "I can, under one condition. When you pick them up, we need to have a serious conversation about some things I have noticed with the kids." There was a pause, then a dismissive laugh. "Whatever, we can talk if you want. Just make sure they do not wreck their nice clothes before we take family photos tomorrow afternoon. Taylor's parents are paying for a professional shoot on the beach." "Fine," I agreed. "I will have them ready. Enjoy your celebration." The next day continued our positive momentum. The children woke up eager to make their beds without prompting and helped prepare breakfast. We spent the morning making special cards for Amber and Taylor, practicing the skills we had been developing. Charlotte showed remarkable empathy in helping Ethan with his drawing when he became frustrated, using the exact phrases I had modeled the day before. By the time afternoon arrived, both children had grown noticeably more respectful, capable, and confident. They expressed genuine disappointment when I told them their parents would be picking them up soon. "Can you be our babysitter every weekend?" Ethan asked, hugging my waist. "You make things fun, but not crazy." I carefully documented our activities and the changes I had observed, preparing examples to share with Amber. The children proudly practiced showing off their new skills, from properly setting the table to the conflict resolution phrases they had learned. We were ready for the conversation ahead, though I had no illusion it would be easy. Amber and Taylor finally arrived at 6:30 Sunday evening, nearly 5 hours later than their extended deadline. They entered the suite laughing about some private joke, smelling of champagne and wearing matching resort robes over swimwear. Both stopped short at the unexpected scene before them. Charlotte and Ethan were sitting at the properly set table, completing simple watercolor paintings. The room was tidy, with the blanket fort now disassembled and all belongings packed neatly. Most shocking to Amber, clearly, was the children's behavior as they noticed their parents. Charlotte put down her paintbrush carefully and walked over without running or shouting. "Welcome back, Mom and Dad. We have been working on something special for you," she said, her voice controlled and polite. "Would you like to see our paintings when they are dry?" Ethan followed his sister's example, remembering to push in his chair before approaching. "Did you have a nice wedding?" he asked, making conversation rather than immediately demanding attention or treats. Amber looked from the children to me with naked confusion. "What happened to them?" she asked, as if they were not standing right there. "Are they sick?" "They are perfectly fine," I replied calmly. "We have just been practicing some new skills this weekend. Charlotte and Ethan, would you like to show your parents the responsibility chart you created?" For the next 15 minutes, the children eagerly demonstrated their weekend achievements, from their improved manners to the conflict resolution strategies they had learned. They showed off the cards they had made, explaining the techniques they had used and the thought behind each element. Throughout their presentation, they took turns speaking, listened to each other, and showed pride in their accomplishments without seeking excessive praise. Amber watched with an increasingly uncomfortable expression, occasionally glancing at Taylor as if seeking confirmation that this transformation was as unsettling to him as it was to her. When the children finished their presentation and asked to be excused to finish their paintings, giving their parents space to talk with me, her discomfort was palpable. Once the children were out of earshot, I suggested we sit down for the conversation I had requested. Amber immediately became defensive. "I do not know what kind of strict boot camp you have been running here, but those are not my kids. They are usually much more spirited and expressive." I kept my tone even and non-confrontational. "They are still spirited and expressive, just in more constructive ways. What you are seeing is children who have experienced clear, consistent boundaries and genuine connection. They are capable of far more responsibility and self-control than they have been allowed to demonstrate." Taylor shifted uncomfortably. "They do seem calmer." Normally by now, Ethan would be having a meltdown about something, and Charlotte would be glued to her tablet, ignoring everyone. I took a deep breath and addressed the larger issue at hand. "This weekend has shown me two important things. First, Charlotte and Ethan are wonderful, capable children who thrive with appropriate structure and authentic praise. Second, the pattern of disrespect that has characterized our family relationships is hurting everyone involved." "What are you talking about?" Amber demanded, though her tone lacked conviction. I met her gaze directly. "I am talking about the way you have treated me for years, culminating in uninviting me from your wedding but still expecting me to provide free childcare. I am talking about telling your children that my dress, my apartment, and my career are trash. I am talking about a pattern of behavior that teaches Charlotte and Ethan that people have value only based on their social status or usefulness." Amber flushed but immediately attempted to deflect. "I never said those exact words. The children must have misunderstood something they overheard. And anyway, this is between us as adults. It has nothing to do with my parenting." Instead of arguing, I called the children back over. With their permission, I asked them to share what they had told me about my dress and what they had heard about my job and home. With innocent honesty, they confirmed everything, adding details about other occasions when Amber had disparaged me in their presence. The unfiltered truth from her children's lips seemed to pierce Amber's defenses in a way my words alone could not have done. For perhaps the first time since we were teenagers, I saw genuine shame in her expression. Charlotte, seemingly sensitive to the tension, added something unexpected. But Aunt Gracie taught us that when people say mean things, it is often because they feel bad about themselves, not because what they are saying is true. And she said, "You love us, even when you say unkind things." This child's wisdom and compassion created the opening I needed. I have allowed this dynamic to continue by never setting clear boundaries, I acknowledged. I wanted to maintain our relationship at any cost, but that approach has not served any of us well, especially the children. The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary. I presented concrete examples of how the children had flourished with consistent, respectful boundaries. I showed Amber and Taylor the simple charts and systems the children had helped create. Most importantly, I explained how our relationship needed to change if we wanted to remain in each other's lives in a healthy way. Initially resistant, Amber cycled through several defensive tactics, from denial to minimizing, to blaming me for being too sensitive. Yet something had shifted. The evidence of her children's positive changes was undeniable, and my calm refusal to accept further disrespect gave her no familiar footholds for our usual dynamic. The breakthrough came when Ethan spontaneously demonstrated the conflict resolution approach we had practiced, interrupting an escalating moment between Amber and me. "Mom, when you raise your voice and interrupt, it makes it hard to understand your feelings. Could you try using an 'I feel' statement instead?" The room fell silent as his innocent application of our weekend lessons laid bare. The contrast between the behavior we were teaching the children and the example being set by adults. Amber looked at her son with a mixture of embarrassment and wonder. In that moment of vulnerability, she finally spoke with honesty. "I have been so afraid of not belonging in Taylor's world," she admitted quietly. "His family has real money, old money. They went to the right schools and know the right people. I have been terrified they will realize I do not belong, that I am just a middle-class girl from Seattle pretending to be something else." She looked at me with tears forming. "It was easier to point out your normal life than to admit how insecure I feel about mine. Every time you seem perfectly happy with your teaching job and modest apartment, it reminds me that maybe all this striving for status is hollow. So I put you down to convince myself I made the right choices." This confession opened the door to a more genuine conversation about our relationship and her parenting. Taylor, surprisingly, supported many of my observations, admitting he had concerns about the children's behavior but had deferred to Amber's approach to avoid conflict. Even more surprisingly, he confessed that his own parents had commented on the children's lack of boundaries and manners, creating additional pressure on their relationship. By the end of our conversation, we had reached several important agreements. First, Amber would respect my boundaries, which included no longer making disparaging comments about my life choices, either to me or to others. Second, she would consider working with a family therapist to address the children's behavior challenges consistently. Third, we would establish regular visits where I could maintain my relationship with Charlotte and Ethan, reinforcing the positive changes that had begun. Most importantly, we acknowledged that rebuilding trust would take time and consistent effort, particularly from Amber. I made it clear that while I was open to healing our relationship, I would no longer accept being treated as less than or taken for granted. 2 months later, evidence of change began to emerge. Amber had found a parenting coach who was helping her establish more effective approaches with the children. She had called me twice to ask for specific advice about techniques that had worked during our weekend together. Though she still occasionally slipped into old patterns of status signaling, she caught herself more quickly and sometimes even apologized without prompting. Charlotte and Ethan maintained many of their new habits, though consistency was an ongoing challenge. During a weekend visit to my apartment, which Amber had finally made time for, they proudly helped prepare a simple meal and cleaned up afterward without complaint. Charlotte even commented that she liked my home because it was cozy and had interesting books instead of just fancy things no one could touch. As for me, the experience transformed my approach to all my relationships. I realized that true class has nothing to do with designer clothes or exclusive addresses. It is about treating others with dignity and respect, regardless of their social position or usefulness to you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stand firm in your own worth, refusing to participate in dynamics that diminish either of you. Enabling bad behavior, whether from children or adults, ultimately harms everyone involved. By setting clear, compassionate boundaries with Amber, I not only reclaimed my own dignity, but created space for authentic connection based on mutual respect, rather than convenience or obligation. The journey of healing our family relationships remains ongoing, with progress and occasional setbacks. But the foundation has shifted towards something healthier, and for that, I am grateful. So I ask you, when have you had to stand up for yourself with family while still coming from a place of love? Have you ever had to teach someone a lesson about respect by simply refusing to accept disrespect? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that setting boundaries with family is not just okay, but sometimes the most loving thing you can do. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that true class is how you treat others, not what you own or wear.